Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. New starting quarterback named officially here in Tennessee. Greg, it is going to be Will Levis's show moving forward.
I personally believe that's the right move. I think that, overall, this team has to look toward the future at this point. Obviously, every team feels they have a playoff run, and we're early enough in the season that the Titans obviously should feel that, hey, they can win football games, and they should feel that way. But given the way Levis has looked, will he have a bad game? Sure, that's possible, but we've talked about that. He really hasn't had a bad game in the two that he started, and he hasn't made the kinds of mistakes without knowing all the details. Obviously, I don't know the huddle through the cadence, through the, what he sees before the snap, if he's given freedom to change plays, or those are the things I don't know. But in terms of the execution of the plays that are being run when he's throwing the football, you haven't had one of those, oh my God, what's he doing? Let's put it this way, he looks like he belongs.
Which is the first step, right? It's right. Why they're making this decision at the time that they are. And as you said, still more, they have a whole half of a football season to go in the AFC South. While the Jags are certainly pulling away, anything can happen in this sport.
We've seen that. We've seen that, yeah. And the one thing about Levis, number one, is I think just the skill set. And this is hard. It's not a quantifiable thing, and I'm certainly not in the building every day. You're there. Okay. But my guess is just with the physical skill set, which is pretty high level, that there's probably a sense that this guy can do a lot of things, and that permeates the offense and probably permeates through the team, that, hey, he can make some throws that are pretty special throws. And, that gives you an opportunity at any point in the game.
I've seen them play games like that Pittsburgh game before, Greg, and while, 16 points is no great success, they were able to move the ball efficiently for the most part. The Steelers did a good job on DeAndre Hopkins in the second half. I'm sure we'll get to that from this past game before we move on to the Bucs. But I guess that is the thing that I hear most often. And it was a part of the report on him coming out of Kentucky. The dude is very, very intense, and he takes this kind of stuff incredibly seriously. The work ethic is something that Mike Vrabel respects tremendously. The fact that he can articulate well the mistakes back to them when they go back and watch the tape, as I think most NFL quarterbacks should be able to do, makes them more comfortable with some of the mistakes that he might make. But so far, Greg, he's playing pretty clean. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely a cleaner version of Will Levis than even I think a lot of us expected to see.
No, and the point is that he's playing behind not a very good O-line.
Yeah.
So when you watch the Steelers tape, you see a lot of muddy, noisy pockets. I thought he functioned very effectively under pressure. He didn't lose his poise, his composure. He didn't lose his clarity. He saw the things. And again, I'm sure, the way things are taught, there were some plays where they say, hey, you should have gone here. Those are things that I don't know. I know a good amount, obviously, but I don't know specifically how they coach certain things versus certain coverages. And I'm sure there are some cases where they'll work through that. And everything I heard about Levis when I did all my research and in fact, knew some people that were on that staff at Kentucky told me that he's a really smart kid, like really highly intelligent. And, my guess is he's probably pretty accountable. And you've been around him, you know how intense he is. That's what they talk about as well. Some say he's too intense, but you'd rather have that than a guy that's laissez-faire. So, I think that it's the right move, and let him grow with the position. Obviously Hopkins, did he sign a 1 or 2 year deal?
2.
Okay, so he'll be here next year, barring anything unforeseen. And obviously, you've got a whole half of the season to play. They've got other young receivers. Brooks will be there. Phillips will be there. Let him grow with these guys. Let him develop a rapport. You have to assume that while there'll be some bad moments, that there'll also be moments where you go, oh, hey, that's kind of working pretty well. And, you want to see that all develop. And they've got young tight ends as well.
The offensive line, we know the situation, Greg, and we talk about geography, how much it matters.
And they do too, by the way. They do too.
Yes, absolutely, and some more changing parts with Nicholas Petit-Frere expected to be done basically for the remainder of the season at this point. So either Chris Hubbard will be back in the lineup, or they'll figure out how to get Dylan Radins in there and continue to patchwork this group together. But the idea of young quarterbacks in a situation like this, a lot of the top prospects go to bad teams. We've talked about this before. This is a team that has a bad offensive line situation. And Greg, I wonder if you can just articulate that as a challenge for a young quarterback, because weapons might be deficient or less than here in Tennessee, but I think it's far easier for there to be detrimental things that are caused from a bad offensive line group than a lack of skill position talent.
I would agree with that. And I think that's going to be one of the real challenges. Through 2 games, it has not been an issue for Levis. There'll be games where it could well be. I mean, it could be this week. Look, they are playing the Bucs. They have Barrett. They have Tryon. They can rush the quarterback. And obviously, we don't know. You have to assume that whether Hubbard's back, we don't know that. It'll be Dillard, I'm sure, at left tackle. And if it's not Hubbard, it'll probably be Radins. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be some issues there in one-on-one pass protection, assuming they choose to do that. They may not. But then that, as we've discussed a number of times, that presents a domino effect in other areas because you're losing eligible receivers as primary route runners. So we'll see, but I thought he handled himself well. Levis that is very effectively against Pittsburgh. They have 2 excellent edge pass rushers. There were some squeezed pockets. He stayed in there. He threw the football. He's a big physical kid, and he's got that quick snap release. So, we'll see. But so far, this, like I said, this is not an X and O point, but you can see it. I'm sure everybody can see it. It doesn't look like anything's happening too fast for him.
Right. And I the audience had sent us some questions, actually, Greg, and one from Swagger Vol on Twitter about what differences you might notice in his tape now through 2 starts, small sample size, right, but versus what you saw coming out of Kentucky. Because the thing that, at least even since the Chicago preseason game, Greg, he does seem like he's managing pressure well. I don't know if his feel for the pressure has improved, but that was always a talking point with him at UK. And I wonder if you've seen what differences you might have seen.
It's funny. I always thought that was a bit overblown.
Okay.
Because I saw him his last 2 years. Now, obviously, his second to last year at Kentucky, he was really, really good. And I thought that if he had had a really good last year, he would have been a top 10 pick. And in fact, as I said, because I knew some people on the staff there, I was told that through August training camp, before he got hurt, by the way, and I've told you that he had 2 injuries and was told not to play.
Right.
But through August training camp, a coach told me that when NFL scouts came in, they were blown away by Levis because he was healthy. He's a big physical dude. He can do anything. And they thought, God, this guy is a really potentially special talent. And then he had the 2 injuries. He lost 4 offensive linemen from his second to last year to his last year. So he just couldn't function the way, number one, physically, and then number 2, with a poor offensive line. So he just didn't, the numbers weren't as good. The execution wasn't overall as good. But I didn't view that year as a case of, oh, my God, he can't play under pressure. So I thought, to me, that was a little overblown. Now, having said that, like I said, hey, any of these given games, because those tackles for the Titans are just not going to be very good in pass pro, could that be an issue? Sure, it could. But I don't think that's a big issue with Levis, to be honest with you. One of those issues where you go, oh, my God.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll see. He'll have more opportunities with decision making. We've talked about his accuracy. Yeah. Certainly, it like we said at the start of the podcast, it's not been perfect.
Has been good, I think. Yeah. I thought there were some throws that are very reflective of not only decision making, but the other thing too is, this is something you have to keep in mind. And this is no knock on Ryan Tannehill at all. So I don't want it to come across that way. Ryan Tannehill has had great success in Tennessee. They made it to an AFC championship game. His win-loss record has been pretty good. This is no knock on him. But Levis is just a more physically gifted guy. And I think that changes the way you call games, and that's another factor. I think you might be more willing. When I say take a shot, I don't mean throw the ball 60 yards down the field. But, a perfect example was, hey, that fourth quarter possession that started from the 8-yard line,
Yes.
where they were in 21 personnel, and he hit Burks on the crosser. That's an aggressive play call deep in your own territory. I'm not saying they would never, ever do that with Tannehill, but I think you feel more comfortable making a play call like that when your quarterback, can zip the ball with some big time juice.
Well, and Greg, we've talked about this, how much smaller your playbook becomes when you have to help the tackles the way that they have to
Right.
in this passing game. And so anywhere that you can find ways to further expand
Right.
or build upon what you're able to do, if Levis's skill set, and it's clear that it has, allows them to do even a little bit more of that, it makes them more of a threat as a passing offense.
Yeah, and even the final drive, I mean, again, obviously he ended up throwing the pick, and I knew exactly why he threw the ball, and I didn't view that as an, oh my God, what's he doing kind of throw. I don't know how you saw it. I mean, it was 4 verticals versus kind of red zone cover 2, cover 4, which everybody plays. He tried to get a defender to move. The middle hole defender was Rush, and he tried to get him to move so he would have enough room to hit the seam to Wiley. It was a tight window throw. I mean, at that point in the game, you're not throwing a check down. It's what, they were less than 20 seconds to go, were there not?
No, it was under 30 seconds.
Under 30. There you go. Yeah. I mean, it's a tight window throw. It had a chance, but the depth of the underneath defender, Alexander, severely limited the margin for error, and Alexander made the leaping interception. But, he hit more 29 yards on the dagger concept prior to that, which was, pretty big time throw in that situation. But again, there's a perfect example on that play, which I know you remember the play. They chipped both Highsmith and Watt to help Dillon Radens. And those are the kinds of things that we're going to see more of in those high leverage critical situations, because the last thing you want is your young quarterback to feel so under duress in third down. The term we use a lot is high leverage critical situations where, he just feels like he's just going to anticipate getting the crap beat out of him. That's the last thing you want.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like that happened with a 35-year-old quarterback with this offensive line group.
Right.
As things, got progressively worse over the course of 2 seasons. Greg, the Steelers defense, always good, always competent. They were without Minkah Fitzpatrick in this game before we move forward to week 10. DeAndre Hopkins was having success against them in the first half, had 60 yards on a couple of receptions in the first half, and then didn't have a catch in the second half. Did you see something specifically that the Steelers did?
I mean, what they did, and I thought he did a phenomenal job, they essentially matched Joey Porter Jr. up on Hopkins when Hopkins lined up at number 1 outside. And there were some snaps even when Hopkins lined up inside, in which Porter went with him. And he played a ton of press man, and I thought he did a really good job. I mean, I don't know how DeAndre Hopkins feels. He probably thinks, hey, man, you should still throw me the ball, and he should feel that way. But I thought that overall, Porter, who's 6'2", 200 plus pounds with arms that are like an offensive lineman's arms.
Great length.
I thought he did a really good job. And, sometimes when you see a guy doing that, you tend to look away and look elsewhere to throw the football, so I can't speak to what's in Levis's head, obviously, but I thought Porter did a really nice job.
So with that, we know that the Bucs have a pretty for a 3-5 team. They've got a better roster than I think many of us might have thought heading into the season, and certainly they've gotten better quarterback play than a lot of us would have expected. I want to start. Let's start with Baker, Greg. What do you like from what you see for the former first overall pick?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for the most part he's played pretty well this year. I think Baker's the kind of guy that I think at his best has to play within timing and rhythm within the structure of the offense. The longer he's in the pocket, the more he holds the ball for whatever reason, whether he feels the defense is taking away a throw or whether he just doesn't see it correctly. The longer he's in the pocket, then he ends up rushing. He rushes himself both mentally and physically, and that's where he starts to have issues. When he can make when he can hit that back foot, feel good throwing it. I mean, the touchdown that appeared to be the winning touchdown that he threw to Otten with less than a minute remaining in the fourth quarter was a really, really good job by Baker Mayfield. He made the right read, the right throw, precise ball location. It was a great throw, and I'm sure most people watching felt that was the game winner. So he can be really sharp. Obviously, they've got good receivers. They've not been able to run the ball with any meaningful consistency or production. You hope this is not the week that happens, but they've not really been able to do that. And I think Baker needs that. I think Baker, and I hate saying the term system quarterback because every quarterback is a system quarterback. They're taught that way. But I think that he does need a multi-dimensional offense. He does need a run game to be part of the offense, for that offense to really be successful.
Yeah, I think the audience, at least this audience, Greg, and we're fortunate that we have the listeners that we do for the podcast, but I think most people differentiate, at least when you say system quarterback versus a quarterback that maybe just relies or needs to work within the system more than another player who might be able to make a play outside of structure or, create more for themselves.
Right. I mean, obviously, when people hear that, they think negatively because, no one says, Patrick Mahomes is a system quarterback, but he is. He's in a system. He just has special abilities that go beyond being in a system. So that's what people mean. Baker's not going to make those kinds of plays. He's not immobile, but he's certainly not going to make those kinds of plays.
So as you thought, they probably thought they had the game-winning touchdown, but they didn't know that they were playing opposite this version of C.J. Stroud, Greg, because he went out there and diced them up. Five passing touchdowns on the day. What do you see when you watch him? We knew that he was going to be a very talented player. I think the Texans have I don't want to say that they've played above their skis a little bit, but they do seem to be elevated by his presence a great deal. What do you like about how Stroud is operating both within structure and outside of structure?
Well, I think it all starts with the fact that Stroud throws the ball really well. I mean, it starts right there. I would say, and this was probably a surprise to many, given what the Bucs bring to the table with their defensive front and their pressure schemes. But I thought, taking nothing away from Stroud, but the most overlooked element of his performance, I thought the pass protection was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I don't know if you got an opportunity to take a peek at that game, Buck, but Laramie Tunsil looked like he was out for a walk in the park. I mean, he made it look so easy in pass protection. He got beat one time, which resulted in a fumble, and I think they recovered it. But other than that, I mean, given that Stroud dropped back well over 40 times, one not so great snap and pass protection is not really an issue over the course of a game.
Sure.
Particularly when you're dealing with Tryon and Barrett. But for the most part, he just was dominating. I mean, he has incredibly light feet, such strong hands, and again, not that we have to worry about that with the Titans, but I thought the pass protection overall was phenomenal. Stroud sees things really well, and he's an aggressive thrower. Like, he has a really good feel at a young age as a rookie quarterback for what open is in the NFL, because a lot of quarterbacks throw the ball well, they look good. You know this about quarterbacks that come up from college and they look the part, everything's nice, but they just don't have a feel for what open is in the NFL, because it's not the same, as you well know. I mean, you do a ton of college football, you're in Vol country, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He has a feel for that.
Yeah,
innate. That's innate. That's not. You can look at the iPad. You can be on the blackboard in the meeting room. But when you get on the field, you either see it that way or you don't.
Yeah, so some dudes have it. That's like it. Right. For all the time that we spend analyzing, it just boils down to that sometimes. Some dudes have it.
Right.
And that is certainly something that seems to be or is very much a part of C.J. Stroud's game. But the Bucs up front, we know that they can get after the quarterback. Certainly, we know the deficiencies of the Titans' offensive line. I keep looking at Vita Vea up against Aaron Brewer, Greg, and I can't imagine that there's not going to be interior pressure involved.
Yeah, that could be a little bit of an issue as well, because Vea is kind of a freak. I mean, he's so big, but he's got incredibly light feet. And they do a lot of cool stuff with pressures, usually involving White, not David. Usually it's White who's involved in their pressures more. David once in a while. But
Devin White and Levante David, just to specify.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I sometimes I just get on a roll here.
That's okay.
Yeah. Thank you. So Devin White is normally the rusher of the linebackers. Vea's he's a load inside. Now, last week, as watching the game, as I'm sure you saw, and you have to believe he'll be better because he's a good player, but Carlton Davis had a really bad game. and he's going to have a better game this week because he's a really good player. In fact, I've read where some receivers who played against him say he's the best corner they faced. And, obviously he was not good last week. He knows that. He got burned a lot. He got burned by Dell twice for touchdowns. He got burned on other plays as well. So, he will play better this week. Now, Dean got hurt last week, so I don't know what his status is. The other corner
we got the first injury report. I'll pull it up just quickly. It literally came out as we were talking here today, or just now. I'm sorry. Continue with your point.
No,
Greg.
go ahead. So I was just going to say that McCollum replaced him at right corner for the rest of the game. So if Dean can't go, I'm assuming it'll be McCollum.
Yeah, Jamel Dean did not practice today with a concussion. Carlton Davis also did not practice today, dealing with a toe situation. You don't know if that's just like
I mean, I would imagine he'll play, but again, I don't know. Toes that's a tough deal sometimes.
Yeah. Traylon Burks, for what it's worth, on the Titan side of things, did not practice today. He, of course, had a scary situation, was put in the concussion protocol on Thursday Night Football.
And he may not go. It's very possible he won't go. Normally, it's not 100%, but normally guys don't go the next week. Although they do have the extra, he does have extra time.
Yes, he did have a bit of a mini bye situation coming off the Thursday Night Football situation. Also worth noting that Sean Murphy Bunting posted a picture of him being wheeled out in a sling from the hospital on his Instagram story. Mike Vrabel did not comment on that. It's Mike's least favorite thing to comment on, but worth keeping an eye on as he deals with a thumb issue that basically.
So obviously Avery came in and played left corner. He's not quite as good as Murphy Bunting, but as we saw, last year, and you can line up and play with Avery. I mean, he's obviously not as good, or he'd be playing, but I don't think he's one of those guys where you hold your breath. I mean, he can line up and play left corner.
The NFL matchup show is how you get your football Sundays started. Fun games all over the place. The AFC North continues to be the best division in football thus far. No teams under.
Well, I imagine that the Titans will be 49ers fans this weekend since they're at Jacksonville.
Certainly so. I assume that game made the matchup show.
In fact, that's a full segment game in part 4. Yes, indeed. It's probably the best game on the docket, overall. Although Browns-Ravens is a good one as well.
Well, I guess just for the 49ers sense of things, both teams coming off a bye, if I'm not mistaken.
You're correct.
You hope, just for the purposes of seeing a competitive game, you hope that the Niners took advantage and got more healthy.
Yeah, I mean, they've been having a lot of problems, with injuries. We'll see how it goes. And obviously, another game we're doing, believe it or not, is Texans Bengals because of what Stroud did, and Joe Burrow. The last 4 games, Joe Burrow has been absolutely phenomenal in all areas: first down, third down, red zone. I mean, there's a guy that just he makes it look easy, and it's not easy, believe me.
Yeah, no, Titans fans breathing a sigh of relief that they got the version of Joe Burrow before that game, couple of game stretch started. That might have looked a little differently here at Nissan Stadium. Check out the NFL matchup show wherever you get your ESPN Plus on demand content. You can set your DVRs as well. And of course, if you're up on a Sunday morning at 5:30 a.m., you can watch it live the way that I do to get ready for my NFL.
There you go. There you go. Appreciate that, Buck.
Oh, listen, I'm right there with you, Sal Palandarius, at 5:30 in the morning, Greg. It's how I get my cup of coffee, then I go about my NFL Sunday.
Beautiful. Love to hear it. Love to hear it.
Appreciate your time as always, my friend, and look forward to doing it again next week.
Thanks.